Today, I want to bring this part 2 to you from Easter because I believe then and I believe now that there's a word for someone, whether it's on campus or watching online, that there's a word for someone. Now, this word is applicable to everybody, but there is a specific group of people that I believe this word is for, and I believe God is targeting you. I'm not. I don't know who you are, but God does, and He's speaking to you. And so I want you to open your spirit, open your heart to this word, and I believe the Lord's going to help you. So with that said, for those of you that were not here 2 weeks ago, turn your attention to the screen for a short video.
A young athlete pushing the limits of a crippling disease, running for as long as she can, and that inspirational moment of triumph in one of her last high school races. Here's ABC's John Donovan.
Good job, Kayla!
At the end of every high school varsity meet Kayla Montgomery has ever run, she has always come in over the finish line in a crumple. You're seeing her literally at a point when she can't feel anything in her legs.
Beautiful, girl.
Oh, man.
The key of this paradox being Kayla's determination and a nerve disease called multiple sclerosis. 4 years ago, this one-time elite soccer player began to lose feeling in her feet and legs and was told that MS would likely leave her someday unable to move, period.
I was mad. I was really mad.
But Kayla took that mad and decided that she was going to run while she still could. Although starting out, she was how fast?
I was kind of slow.
Average, at best.
That's Patrick Cromwell, the coach who took her on and watched her get faster and faster.
Fastest yet.
And who was always there at the finish. And here's why. When Kayla runs, the natural increase in her body temperature temporarily gives the MS the edge again. In the last part of races, Kayla has lost all feeling below her waist. She lacks the control to slow to a stop.
Oh, man.
And the reason her cries are so urgent
Help me.
is that with water, with cooling, she can feel again.
We got it.
And then in her last high school race ever, she's in the gold shirt, this bad break.
I should fell.
You gotta go now, Kayla!
She did get back into it, and she moved up, and then this.
3,200-meter run champion.
And for a final time, the finish line and the help.
I got you. You did. Little fall.
And by the time of the ceremony, she can feel, well, everything. John Donovan, ABC News, Washington.
What a phenomenal story, this young lady, Kayla Montgomery, running with purpose. In part 1, I shared 4 things with you to catch you up, to help you to remember. Number 1, we all have a race to run. Kayla said we all can turn something bad into something amazing. We all have been through tragedy of one kind or another. We all are broken to one degree or another. And because of your brokenness, you will need to find a new way to run. Kayla, after the MS, had to find a new way to run than she did before, and so will you and I. Whatever the tragedy is, whatever the brokenness is, we're going to have to find a new way to run. You have to learn to deal with the tragedy that's in your life. Number 2, we all have an opportunity, we all have an appointment to keep. Kayla said, every day that I run, it might be my last day. And we should live the same way, that today could be my last day, so let me run hard. Let me run with passion. Let me leave everything out on the field, as they say in sports. You have to remember that time is running. The question is, are you? And we have to learn to pick up the pace. Time is running. I have fewer days in front of me than I do behind me. And so I have to pick up the pace because I want to run hard. Number 3, we all have a reason to quit. Kayla said, I used my diagnosis as an excuse to be afraid, and I almost quit. She used her MS as an excuse, but then she decided, I'm not going to do that. So here's the statement for you. Pain can be a controlling factor or a motivating force in your life. Kayla decided, instead of letting the MS control me, I'm going to use it as a motivating factor to drive me. And you can do the same with whatever tragedy it is. Whether you were abused, whether you went through a horrible divorce, whether you have some physical ailment, some disability, whether your disability is physical, emotional, mental, whatever that is, use it as a motivating force to run your race and to reach your goal. Number 4, the last one, we all have a coach who will catch us. You heard the coach say that with one lap to go, he'd run across the track and just get ready to catch her. He was there waiting on her. And so I said to you 2 weeks ago, you need to run your race, and at the finish line, Jesus will catch you to the applause of heaven. You say, Pastor, you don't know what I've been through. I understand. You don't know how hard it is, Pastor. I understand. But you need to run your race. Run your race. And one day, when you go across that finish line, Jesus will catch you. He'll be there waiting on you. And all of heaven will stand and applaud you. It will be worth it. One day it will be worth it. You have a race to run. Run it. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 6, 7, and 8, the Apostle Paul, writing to this young preacher, said to him, you take over. Paul knew that his time of departure was at hand. So he said to him, you take over. I'm about to die. My life an offering on God's altar. This is the only race worth running. I've run hard right to the finish. I believed all the way. All that's left now is the shouting, God's applause. Depend on it. He's an honest judge. He'll do right, not only by me, but by everyone eager for his coming. Let's title this, Running with No Feelings, Part 2. Father, bless the reading of your word. I prayed in Jesus' name, and everyone said amen. Why people quit running after Jesus. Now, this was the tie to Easter Sunday that I just wasn't able to make. In John chapter 20 is the story, of course, of the resurrection. And verse 10, though, it said, puzzled, Peter and the other disciples then left and went back to their homes. Now, this is amazing to me. You remember the night of Gethsemane, the scattering of the sheep, the denial of Peter, the crucifixion, no one there but the Marys and John, the beloved, the tomb. The disciples are in that upper room, wherever they are, locked down, afraid of the Roman soldiers and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, afraid that what they did to Jesus, they're going to do to them. You remember the story after the resurrection. Jesus comes into the room where doubting Thomas was, and he says, peace. And he reveals himself to them. But up until that moment, these guys had quit running, and they quit chasing after Jesus. They had no feelings. Everything they believed in, everything they had hoped for, it seemed it died at Calvary. They had left their business, their families, their reputation to follow after Jesus, running after him, and now it seems like it's just all falling apart. And so when you read this, you have to ask the question, why did they quit chasing after him? And there's a few reasons why people quit running. I understand, again, there's tragedy, there's heartache. And sometimes you just can't feel anymore. Sometimes you go through church trouble, church heartache, and you just quit feeling. Sometimes you're burned out, burned over. You've given everything, you just don't have anything else to give. And you just can't feel anymore. So often people will say, I just can't feel the presence of the Lord anymore. I just can't feel. I understand. I've gone through seasons where I went into that dark night of the soul and burnout where you can't feel. And I've shared with you many times my experience in 1997 where for one solid year, I couldn't feel God's presence. I couldn't feel. I couldn't cry. I could not. And yet I had 2 children to raise. I had a church I was building. I had to work a full-time job, a part-time job, pastor that church. I'm running as hard as I can, and I can't feel his presence. and yet I still had to run. So do I understand Kayla's testimony? Yeah, I do, because I know what it's like to run when you can't feel anything. I know what it's like to run when you can't feel your legs, but you still have to run hard because there are people depending on you. There are people. My children needed me to be there for them. My wife, my church, my 2 jobs, they needed me. I remember one day I went into the office. I was, of all things, I was working in the medical field. It's scary, but I was working in the medical field. And I went in the office and my owner of the business and supervisor said to me, "Randy, you've lost your edge." And I said, "Listen, I'm sorry." And I tried to, man up and get it again. But I was going through a very dark time, and it was very hard. But I had to run with passion, and I had to run hard. But looking through this story and wondering, why did these preachers quit running after Jesus? And I found a few things I'd like to share with you. Number one, when there appears to be no further advantage to the running. In John chapter 20, verse 1, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. Now, she goes there, and you have to pause and not only see what's in the story, but what's not in the story. And I want to ask the question, where was the 5,000 that he fed, the fishes and the loaves? Where was Lazarus that he raised from the dead? Where was the woman with the issue of blood that he healed? Where were those that followed him when it was to their advantage to follow him? Think about that. So let me ask the question, have you ever had a friend whose friendship was contingent on their personal gain? Have you ever had a friend whose friendship was there as long as you had something to give? But when you ran out of money, when you ran out of position and power, when you no longer had something to give them, they were nowhere to be seen. Have you ever had that? But you have to remember this lady here, Mary. And Luke chapter 7, verse 47, it talks about he that is forgiven of much loveth much. And she was there to wash his feet. And so we understand now why she was the one that showed up at the tomb, because she still loved him, even when it wasn't to her advantage. You see, Mary's love for the master did not fade when the benefit of following him did. And that's the word here this morning for all of us, that it's so easy for us to follow the Lord, to run after Jesus, to do it with passion when everything is going great. But let us lose the job, let us lose the contract, let us lose something, let us go through a tragedy, let us suffer loss of some kind, and suddenly we quit running hard after him. I have always thought that things like 9/11 or COVID or whatever the tragedy is would drive people to the church, but it seems like so often it drives them out. They just quit going. So often when people get in trouble, instead of running to the church, instead of calling the pastor, instead of coming to church, they tend to fade away, because it's easy to run after Jesus when he's got the fish and the loaves. But as soon as that quits, it's so easy for us to stop chasing hard after him. So the first one is, we quit running when there appears to be no advantage to it. Second reason I found in our story is when God's plan includes the unexpected. John chapter 20, verse 2. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, being John, we believe, the one Jesus loved, and said, hey, they've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. You see, we struggle with the unexpected when we have to say, I didn't see that coming. When it's the suddenly, when we just don't understand the plan that God's working in our life. You see, we, for the most part, we all like normal. We like predictability. We like things to be consistent, to stay the same. We want to be on this little path, and we want to take that Q-beam and shine it way down the road and be able to see where we're going. But the Bible says your word is a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path. You can't take that lamp and turn it up like this and shine 100 yards down the road. It doesn't work like that. It's in front of you. It's a circle of light. And it only moves when you step in faith into that light. And then it moves a little bit. And then you take another step and it moves a little bit more. But we don't like that. I've taken it and turned it up before and tried to shine down the road, and it doesn't work. You're wasting your time. But see, we don't like the unexpected. But the fact is, normal is the enemy of the extraordinary. Normal is the enemy of something that is extraordinary. These preachers were all locked down in the room afraid. Mary went to the tomb. This wasn't normal, but she went, and she got to see the Lord, something extraordinary. So you see, we have to be careful when we get frustrated with the unexpected. But the fact is, we serve a God of the unexpected. And everyone said amen. Here's the thing. The question for you and I this morning is this: can your faith trust beyond knowing what's next? Can my faith trust beyond knowing what is next? Or do I have to know everything before I step out in faith? Does my ability to trust him take me beyond what I know? Do I have that ability to, in essence, march off the map? I remember as a young preacher, when I was an evangelist, I was 19, 20, 21 years old. And I used to preach, and I loved telling the story of Alexander the Great that came to the river, and beyond him there was no maps, and his generals came to him and said, "Sir, we don't know what's beyond this river." And he led out, I think it was Alexander the Great. Where's Steve Havard? He's a historian, he knows. But he led out and went out, and his men followed him. And beyond that lay the riches of Asia. Listen, does my faith allow me to march off the map of what I know? Does my faith allow me to go beyond what I know, what is next? And so we have to expect God to do the unexpected. We have to expect God to do something we've never seen before. That's why I've shared with you before, my fear of the next revival, if it's in my lifetime, is that I could miss it because it doesn't look like Brownsville. It doesn't look like the charismatic movement. It doesn't look like the Jesus movement. All three that I experienced. Could it look different? Could it smell different? And if it is, I want to pick up on it, because I know that new wine takes new wineskins. And God will do the unexpected. And he'll do something without asking my opinion. Isn't that amazing? The audacity that God would do something without consulting with me. But he'll do the unexpected. So can your faith trust beyond knowing what is next? Number 3, in this story, when God's destiny doesn't include your desired destination. Again, back to our story, John 20, verse 9. For until then, these preachers quit running. They hadn't understood the scriptures that prophesied that he was destined to rise from the dead. You see, they didn't understand. They thought he was going to come back, he was going to rout the occupying army of Rome, reestablish the throne of David, and bring Israel back into its glory. They did not understand the death, the burial, and the resurrection. They didn't get it. So you see, they didn't understand God's destination. So you got to know this, that underestimating the difficulty of the assignment will get you in trouble. Be careful with that. Underestimating. It's not easy. It's not easy to run hard after him. It's not easy to follow what you believe is your destiny. Listen, I go back over 40 years, looking at preaching for 40 years, pastoring for over 30 years, and it hasn't always been easy. How many knows that had God back 40 years ago at 19, when Suzanne and I headed out one night at midnight, sold everything we had and headed out, only had 2 meetings scheduled, but we're gonna take America by storm. We're gonna be a flaming evangelist. We're gonna change the world. I had 2 weeks worth of revivals, and I had a wife to support. But here we go, just bold, believing, went. Get up in the morning, go to the church and pray, believing God's gonna give us revival and move and go after God. But how many knows, had God sat me down and showed me the next 40 years, I probably would have never went. He's gracious that way. But underestimating the assignment will get you in trouble. You need to realize it's not always gonna be easy. You gotta know it's gonna take faith, sacrifice. I remember a statement, oh my God. I was so hard as a young preacher, Jesus. I wasn't sure, I was horrible. I got some old tapes I could let you listen to sometime. It was horrible. I used to quote this preacher. I don't know if it was Murray or Knox or Spurgeon. It was one of the classics. But I used to quote this thing, God didn't save you to have a jolly time. He saved you to sacrifice, to suffer, and to serve. And I never understood why people didn't get excited about that. How many I want to sign up for that one. To sacrifice, to suffer, and to serve. And then poor people just looking at me like, my God. But it's a true statement. And we owe it to our young people to tell them there'll be times when you will have to sacrifice, maybe suffer some and serve. That's part of the kingdom because Jesus said, every day take up your cross. Follow after me. But that's how we change the world. That's how we see people saved. And so we have to know that the assignment will not always be easy. You have to know, you're gonna love this. The marriage you prayed for in tongues, you're now leaving cursing. You prayed him in tongues, but now he's walking out the door and you're cussing him as he goes. How many knows that Prince Charming, after the marriage, isn't always charming? Okay, y'all didn't like that one. Like back then, they didn't like the sacrifice, suffer, and serve either. How many knows we need to be honest with our kids when they get married? And cut out all that Hallmark stuff. Wait a minute, you can watch it. I'm just saying, cut out all that Hallmark, gooey thing, she's perfect, he's perfect. I mean, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. I don't know why y'all keep watching them. They're all the same. They all start the same and end the same. It's like, okay, well, there's nothing real about that. I mean, come on. They all look perfect. They act perfect. And they just fall in love. And it's so gooey. And then it's wonderful. And it ends. It's so beautiful. But they don't share all the real stuff with you. 2 o'clock in the morning, colicky baby. When you're in a public place and he blows out a diaper. How many's had that one? I've done it. Walk in a place with Justin in my hand and standing there and then look down and there's a puddle down there. A brown puddle. Say, okay. And turn around, walk out the door, and leave that little surprise. They don't tell you that one. They don't tell you about the long nights when the checkbook doesn't balance. They don't tell you. They don't tell you all the stuff, the real stuff. But you got to remember, the assignment isn't always going to be exactly what you thought it was going to be. She or he or they, it, the new job, is not always going to be what you thought it was. It's going to be hard at times. You see, God's prophetic promise does not always match our preferred plan. So when I started the ministry, I thought, take it by storm. There were times when I couldn't feed my family. There were times when I had no money to buy my wife a birthday present. There were times that I had to go to the pawn shop to pawn something so I could buy groceries so I could feed my family. I've had my lights cut off. I've had a card given to me where I could see straight through the floorboard to the road. I've had hard times. And I said, you never told me about this. You never told me. To have people get up and walk out on you only because you said the truth. To have people stab you in the back that you were good to and you blessed them with everything you had. He didn't tell me all that. But that's the deal. When God's destiny doesn't always include your desired destination. Number 4, and the last one. Why did these guys quit running? When you suffer the loss of something or someone. John chapter 20 again, verse 15. He asked her, woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for? Thinking he was the gardener, she said, sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you have put him and I will get him. You see, perhaps Mary assumed he was a grave robber because back then they would rob graves and take things, take people. A grave robber. And there are some in this room and watching online that you feel like you've had the grave robber visit you. Treasures, things you cherished, you buried, but the grave robber came and took it. And I know that, as I've said many times, that often so much can become too much. And there are people in this room and watching online that you've suffered a loss of something or someone. She lost Jesus. She lost the man that she put all her faith in and who she loved dearly. And perhaps you've lost something, a loved one, a marriage, a business, a ministry, reputation. You've lost something. And it's so easy when you lose something or someone to stop running. It's so easy to do that, to say, you know what, I'm just done. I'm just done. This Christian thing, this church thing, I'm just done. He never told me it was going to be like this. I'm just done. But you have to remember, an eternal perspective makes temporal suffering bearable. And when I go through things, and I've been through things, and I'm still going through things. And when I do, I try to remind myself, this is just temporary. And I try to keep that eternal perspective and to remember I'm laying up treasures for eternity and that this is just a race that I'm running. And there are times when, like Kayla Montgomery, I can't feel anything. I can't. I can't feel anything. I don't feel like a preacher today. I don't feel like a Christian today. I don't feel like serving in the city today. I don't feel like getting up and going today, but you do it anyway because you have an eternal perspective. I don't feel like it. Look, you don't always feel like being faithful, being trustworthy, keeping your integrity. I've told you many times, when temptation comes, I don't I don't pass on temptation just because I'm a wonderful human being. I pass on temptation because I have an eternal perspective. And I can't bear the thought of breaking his heart. I can't bear the thought of breaking my wife's heart or my children or my grandchildren. I can't take it. I can't take the idea of breaking your heart, of losing my integrity and my reputation. I can't do it. She, he, it, they, that is not worth it. I'm sorry. It ain't worth it. I don't care how sweet it smells. It ain't worth it. Don't do it, guys. It's a trap. It's a lie. If his lips are moving, he's lying. He's the father of lies. And you've got to know that. And so that keeping an eternal perspective, I want to tell you what, like Kayla, sometimes I run with no feeling, but I see at the end of that race, there's Jesus standing there. And I know one day I'm going to cross that line and he's going to catch me. He's going to catch you. And when he does, the Father's going to stand up. The angels and the elders are going to stand up. And you're going to hear them say, well done, good and faithful servant. It's going to be worth it. In the video, did you see when Kayla bent over and they put that medal around her neck, she looked up smiling. One day, they're going to put a wreath on your head and you're going to smile and you're going to say, it was worth it. David, come help me. So with Kayla Montgomery, her story of running with purpose, her life lessons, find purpose in your pain. Sometimes you need to learn a new way to run. I've told you many times that when I go to hire people for the ministry, I'm always trying to find somebody who walks with a limp. Jacob wrestled with the Lord, and it changed him into Israel. You always want people in the ministry that walk with a limp. People that have been through something, that have been through some storms, and they have scars. Because like with Jesus after the resurrection, and he says, Thomas, it's me. Look, scars are the credentials of the overcomer. If I'm gonna go into a fight, if I'm gonna get in a street fight, I'm gonna pick the guy behind me that's got the ugliest face, that's been beat up the most. The guy that's got the scars, got some teeth missing, got some scars. He's been cut a few times. I used to know a guy that did street fighting. He said, I learned early, if you'll take the knife, he said, the belly, you're gonna love this, ladies. The belly is, the skin right there is real thin. He said, just slice that ever so gently. And he said, when their intestines fall out in their hands, they lose all the energy to fight. Full service church here. We want you to know how to street fight. We want you to know how to do it all. You want a guy, though, that's been to Peniel, and he wrestled with God, and his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. That's what you want. Sometimes you got to learn how to run a new way. And number 3, make every day count, because you have an appointment with death. Don't miss, you're not going to miss it no matter what you do. You've got an appointment with death. So run while you can. So, time is running. The question is, are you? Pick up the pace. Get busy. Quit wasting your time and your life. But here's the thing that's encouraging too. In our story, it said she came running in verse 2. And then in verse 3 and 4, it said, so Peter and John started running. They were locked down in fear. They quit chasing after him because it was to no advantage for them. But she kept running. And she inspired them. And so they came running. The fact is, as with Kayla, your dedication becomes an inspiration to others. So run and run hard. Run hard and you'll inspire other people to run hard. And as Kayla's final lesson for us, run. Even when you don't feel like it.